Morning, Jonathan.
Not anymore.
Nope, oh, yeah, no, you're right.
Not for me, at least.
Well, good afternoon then.
Thank you.
Hey, now. Hey, Luigi. How is everybody doing today?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Gonna have the first 70+ degree day here in Oregon of
Nice.
the year. Yes.
I'm up in Seattle, and I think I saw 71 in my car last night around 5 o'clock, and I'm not sure if it was the car just playing jokes. But... Hello, David.
Hello. I'm not seeing you very well. I went for an eye exam and they did the dilation.
Oh,
So I'm right now struggling to see.
You're like a cartoon character.
Right. Big eyeballs. And, it's hard to handle a computer when you can't easily read the letters. I don't know how the blind do it.
It does. Yeah. Yep.
But I'm here. But maybe I shouldn't take notes right now.
No, I will add you to the agenda for you.
Thank you.
Just turn that brightness down.
So everybody else, if you want to, I think I added everybody, but if you want to add any notes or things that you'd like to talk about to the agenda, feel free. We'll give it another maybe 1 minute and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everybody to the April 26th Identifying Security Threat Working Group. I will be your host. Do we have any new members who would like to introduce themselves? I think everyone has been here before, but if not, here's your chance. Or if you just want to say hi, here's your chance too.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Noah. All right. So let's see. Project updates. Do we have anybody who would like to update us on some of the work that they are working on?
I have.
Go for it. Floor is yours, Luigi.
Okay, about the security insights in the last week, slowly for my fault, it's my bad, but I have collected a lot of feedback by Jonathan. Good feedback, honestly. I mean, very good argumented and opinions and comments. And so there are two open pull requests ready to be merged. One is to improve the granularity and the information that maintainer can share about automated tool and bot. So what bot or automated tool can do on that repo, for example, open issue or open pull request to fix something or something similar. This was a real use case because Jonathan is a very massive open source researcher, so he need to optimize how he submit the fix or the issue to report something. And there is also an improvement that is definitely something that we need to improve. So in the section to link the security insights, so the repo to the different ecosystem where the package is deployed, there was a regex that permit just HTTP or HTTPS URL, but it is better if we support package URLs. That is now a standard or something similar, so I have just changed that. And then there is probably the most, not critical, but most important, or with and high impact on the specification. Jonathan proposed to remove all the dependencies key with the information about the third-party packages. So the link to the dependency file like requirement.txt or package.json similar. And also this SBOM, where that was a key or a value to add a link to this SBOM file. There are two main reasons. I try to summarize, but Jonathan, please correct me if I summarize in the wrong way. But the reason to remove the packages link, I mean the file like requirement.txt or package.json, is that it's not clear what is a package file, because if you have a Docker file, you need to link everything that you upload in the Docker file or what else. And in addition, scanner are quite good to find these files, so it's something that is not so important to have. Because there are sometimes misalignment between scanner and the specification, like Python now is trying to change, but it's not so critical, and scanner are quite, maintainer of scanner are quite fast and quick to align the scanner to this kind of requirements and files. And about this SBOM, there is no standard, or there is no a unique way or a standard way to deploy or to share this file at the moment. It's not clear where project or company should share this file. There is not a sort of centralized service to collect all this SBOM. There is no standard for the nomenclature of the file. So Jonathan suggests to not have this voice in the specification. Honestly, I don't know. I have no strong opinion about this. I can understand his point. At the same time, maybe it can be interesting to know if where people share this file, but this can add the friction, because if you change the SBOM, or you just automate the SBOM generation and the deployment of the SBOM file for every release that you made, this means that you need to update the security insights for every release. That is quite annoying, because it is a human file that can be read by scanner, but it is a human file, the YAML file. So I agree that maybe we can deprecate this SBOM value, but at the same time, in this SBOM project that now it's quite important, I see that company and projects are trying to implement it. Maybe we need, a sort of standardization on how we want to share and name this file. That is a good point. It is a good discussion, not just for the security insights. It's a good discussion for the SBOM file, in my opinion. If you go on the repo, there is the entire thread, and that is why Jonathan suggests to remove the dependency. Honestly, they are good arguments. I can agree, especially because if in the future we want to re-implement or re-add them, we can change the version of the specification. So there are no particular conflict. But if we want to release a version 1 and try to test it in our repo, maybe we need to have something that is easy to use. Yes, David?
Yeah, so I guess So the fundamental question is, how can we make it easy to find a software bill of materials, an SBOM, right? That's the fundamental question here? That
The
we're trying to
fundamental
answer?
question is that at the moment it's not easy to find the SBOM file because there is no standard. The idea was okay, add to the security insights. It's better than nothing, and at least the scanner can find it. But without having a standard at the moment, you need to release a SBOM for every project release, because every version you have maybe change, and you need to have a new SBOM file. So you need to update the security insight for every release that you do. Okay, you can automate it. It's a YAML, so it's very easy to automate this kind of. But the point is that there is not an easy way for scanner, for human, and also for specification to create a place where people can easily communicate. I mean, or you put in the repo, in the main folder, and now the maintainer and the user can easily find it. But there is no standard. I have tried to regex Google to understand if people use or the same folder or the same URL path or something similar, or if the package systems start to support the SBOM file. If I remember correctly, there are some attempts from some package system. I'm not totally sure, but at the moment there is no standard, and this may be hard to maintain the security insights if we don't have a standard.
Yeah, I agree that there's a need for such a thing, and I've talked to some other folks about this. I'm not sure I can give you answers, but I may be able to give you some insights, pun not intended. I think one of the challenges is that security insights, YAML, is, at least as my understanding, is fundamentally mapped to a particular source code repository. And yet there are many ways that SBOMs can get generated. Typically, the best way to determine an SBOM for a given package is to determine it during build time. And there's no necessary map. In the general case, a single source repo will map to 0 or more, possibly many more packages. This becomes especially obvious when you look at system packages, where typically every Linux distro has a separate package. For macOS, there's going to be at least one for brew. There's going to be one or more for the Microsoft Windows ecosystems, often recompiled in every use. And so the reality is that an SBOM, if you're going to, you can generate an SBOM of sorts from the source code. That has this weaknesses. You're going to get more accurate information at the build time, but now you have to probably modify the build process to capture it, and B, you have to figure out how to make it so that recipients can figure out where it is, and that it maps to that package and not this one. So I think it's more complicated. I mean, yeah, I think it's more complicated than, hey, I've got a source repo. Where's my BOM? Well, unless you're doing a source code BOM, probably the wrong place to even ask. Now that doesn't unfortunately tell you what to do. I can just tell you I can tell you some of the challenges with doing it at the source code repo level. I do think this needs to get solved. I don't have a simple solution for it, and if somebody does, I would be delighted to hear it.
Michael?
I think that's a good point. I started out thinking, no, of course we should put SBOM in there, and now I'm like right along the line. I think the security anti-spec isn't repository centric. It's just a file that lives with a bunch of other files. So you could distribute it along with your package to point. So if in your package, your SBOM is called foo, not an SBOM, you could have the security insight spec point to that file as your SBOM, or you could have multiple files because it's just an array, things like that. Having it in the repo means that I think it's more discoverable. The value of that, I think, is in question because the repo is not the thing that you use. You use a some sort of a build artifact or
Right.
thing.
I think that's the problem is that there's no
yeah.
reason to believe that the source has any clue about the package delivery.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
this file, as it's described, there's a quote from the README. This file is then put under version control, provided to potential users, and updated as needed. It's intended to be checked into source control as a
Yeah.
right. Like if that's the intended discovery of this file, then it shouldn't be. If the intended discovery of this file should be it lives in a repository, then it shouldn't rely upon anything that's not repository, like that can't be static.
So you could, for example, like GitHub can generate SPDX SBOMs from the source. The problem is that that is only accounting for the source code, not for the software is built. And since in many cases the builder is a separate org, which the source code may or may the source code distributor may not have any knowledge of.
Sorry, you're saying that GitHub can build an SBOM or can build an SBOM for you, yes?
Yes, from the source repo. Yes, there's different kinds of SBOMs, and this is there's a paper that I'm hoping someday before I die will actually get released because it's been finished for several months. I'm not sure why it's not been released yet, but it's been observed, and a lot of folks who've been studying SBOMs that there's fundamentally different kinds of SBOMs, very much influenced by the inputs that they use. So what people are calling source SBOMs are SBOMs generated purely from the source code. You absolutely can do that from a repo. Now it's generated, and you generally don't want to insert generated code into data into a repo, but you could at least insert, here's how to find it into a repo.
If I could object that, package lock files are generated, and best practice is generally to check those into the repo. Does that change things?
Yeah, no, because they're generated, but the assumption is that in fact you could generate others, but this is the one we care about. And in fact, we are specifically forcing lock files are actually an interesting case because you're right, they are generated, but they're generated with other data. It's not like you can just, hey, I'll just regenerate a lock file every day and everything will always work. That's not really true.
Would you consider, though, an SBOM to be, I don't want to say exactly the same thing as a lock file, because I know it's not, but like in the same spirit of a lock file?
No, and here's why. And it's a great question. And you know, and obviously there's in reality, of course, there's gradations here. Okay, so let me attempt to create an intellectually honest answer, even though we all know that there's nuance and complications. Okay, I always try to be as honest as I humanly can be, but the rationale here is, you know, typically when people talk about an SBOM, they're referring to a particular package. Basically, I took source code, I compiled it somehow. That's the software I'm actually using. I'm generally not using the original sources. I'm using something that was built. In practice, in many, though not all ecosystems, that process brings in other stuff that isn't in the repo. And you cannot just guess from the repo itself whatever else is going on. I'll give you, I mean, it becomes painfully obvious for the systems level languages, where you start yanking in system libraries, other kinds of components. There's configuration options that are specific to a system. And the result is that there's software in there that you can't be sure of looking only at the source code. Whereas the lock file is just saying, of the options, here's, of the version options, here's the ones that we are going to lock, that we recommend locking into, and, we know work.
Fair enough.
To say just one thing about how and why, or what was in my mind when I have added this bomb in Security Insight. When I added it, I knew that there was not a standard or a standard place to put it. And in my mind, I don't remember why, probably because I found it on Google. I have seen that some projects, so not OpenSSF, just some project, release this bomb in a path of the URL of the main page. Like you have site.com/download to download the program or the app. You have site.com/SBOM and a list of SBOM. Technically just one for the last version, but it's not important at the moment. So the idea was that people add in the SBOM URL with a sort of folder or path where they put the oldest SBOM. So more for the human than for the scanner for now. But I agree with Jonathan also why there are good reasons to not add this, but instead to not add, if we add it, but in a sort of optional, so you don't need to add it to the Security Insights, and we add a comment that is an experimental feature just to say, hey, if you have a SBOM, please share a sort of generic link where people can find it, so we can start to map how people share this SBOM file. This can help us to have more visibility, or also for scanner to create data to know how people share the SBOM file. And in addition, it does add friction to people that don't want to add this information.
If you're putting this information, right, in a file that's intended to be read by machines, it should not be generic how to interpret a value. It should be right. Like if you want it to be something that we understand, we can encourage people to put it in their README if we want them to, like, if we want to say, like, where are your SBOMs? But like if we're using this as something that's intended to be parked by machines and used as a usable piece of information to track down an SBOM, it shouldn't be like arbitrary how that field should get interpreted to try to track down what subdirectory the SBOM actually is published at.
I don't think that was the implication. I think it was the entire field itself is not required by spec to be included. So include it or don't include it. But if you include it, it should provide it is a structured thing. It's not just like a piece of text that you could write whatever you want.
The problem that I have with this thing is that, and the other big problem that I have with this thing is every time you publish an SBOM, you're going to publish an SBOM that's versioned. It's going to be published with a path that's versioned.
Yeah.
So then as soon as you start publishing things with version paths, then if there's no standardized way of saying, okay, for this SBOM, I want to access this version at this subpath, right? You can't link to the actual SBOM. You're linking to a subpath of the folder that contains those SBOMs, and you're not linking to the SBOM.
Yeah, I understand all your point, but there are two things. The Security Insight initially born to aggregate information that have no standard. For example, a lot of projects have a security policy, but not in the same place. So scanners sometimes, for example, the scorecard, evaluate a project in a bad way, or just don't give points because the tool was not able to find the security policy, but the Apache Foundation had the security policy just in a different place. So the idea is that we can use the Security Insight to start to map how people share this SBOM, and we can write in the comment or in the specification comment that it is an experimental label or value, and you don't need to change for every version. Just try to give a point or point at people, human initially, and then in the future scanner, but it is a second step. Initially, just point a human to your SBOM, and in this way, scanner can just don't consider this value, even if there is in the scanner can just say, okay, this is interesting. Maybe we can add in a web interface like Sneak does for the security.md that add the link if there is a security.md. but the scanner can decide also to ignore this bomb in the security insights, because at the moment it's just experimental, because they have seen that cannot trust the information for a lot of reasons. But at the same time, scanner can start also to aggregate information and say, oh, the 50% of project puts bomb in this folder or using this nomenclature. Maybe we can standardize this nomenclature or suggest this nomenclature. So there is also this approach or goal in the security insights, try to understand how people use a specification or a standard or just a new file and something similar. Even if I totally agree with you, and probably we can add a disclaimer, you don't need to update the security insights for every bomb if your bomb has, I don't know, the version or the commit or something similar. We can just say, I share an example link and explain in the comment section how to re-elaborate it. And we have a comment section for this reason. Also for the security, report, I mean, for the penetration test report that some projects have, there is no standard, but a lot of open source projects have a yearly penetration test. You don't know where they are stored or shared. You want just to have a link, and it's better than nothing. Then we can start also to try to.
I think the biggest problem here is that there's no clearly defined user story for what I think that it would be useful to start from a point of what are the user stories we are trying to achieve here, right? Like if we don't have user stories, then all of these are, well, maybe we want to do this. Well, maybe we want to do that. Well, maybe it's not a clearly defined, these are the set of constraints and the use cases that we are trying to satisfy.
The user story is a human, a CISO. They need to decide to implement an open source project. I want to find this bomb without losing time.
Right, but you want to find, so you're a human, not, so is this spec intended to be consumed by automation and bots, or is this spec designed to be to be viewed by humans?
Both. Yeah. It was it is written, if I remember correctly, in the README, also in the presentation. It is both for human because it is reading a YAML is easier to read a JSON.
Right. Is this intended to be meaningful to this in the same way to the human and the bot, right? Or is there an expectation that there may be meaning that a human can retrieve from this document that a bot can't, and there may be meaning that a bot can retrieve that a human can't? And do we know which fields have which characteristics?
Can you repeat slowly? Sorry.
Okay, I actually, let me cut to the chase, which is, I think the assumption is that it must be machine processable, because if it only has to be processed by a human, we don't need it within this file.
Correct.
READMEs already exist. So since READMEs exist, the only reason to put something in Security Insights is because you want to be able to understand it in some other way as well.
Exactly.
And so my argument here is that if you need human insights to understand that URL that's being provided for where the SBOM is, you are violating the expectation of what the file should be giving you, should be supplying.
Not properly. It's for example, again, the security policy is a good example. Not all the projects have the same URL for the security policy. You add the URL in the security insight, the scanner report you directly in your dashboard together with other information. For example, you can aggregate information about the penetration testing, the security MD. So you can know if a project have all these things, and at the same time, you have a URL that a human can read, because the security policy is a sort of README for security. So a scanner cannot read it for you, but you can aggregate a lot of information that maybe are in the security policy that are written just in a human way, but you add it in the security inside, so a machine can read it for you according to the purpose of the goal that you have. Just compare multiple projects for compliance, or just to find easier some information. For example, if you are human, you can find easy the security policy, but you need to read it to find the security contact. In the security site, you can easily find, a scanner can easily read the file to find the security contact, or to know if you have a bug bounty, or to know if you have a penetration test. But if you want to read the penetration test report that is a PDF file, you need to be a human. Same for SBOM. If there is a link to the folder with all the SBOM file, probably for the scanner not so helpful, it can just provide you a link. That is better than nothing. But then you need to read the file, at least to understand how they are shared. So I agree that we need a
Well,
human.
but reading the file, SBOM files themselves, generally they're standard formats.
Right.
know,
They're
where-
intended
so-
to be
so they're
parsed
all
by
machine-
humans, right? They're SPDX or whatever, right? Like
Well,
that's
SPDX is intended to be processed by machines, and yes,
Right.
it is also readable, human readable, but there's a syntax, there's a semantics, and so on. Same for Cyclone DX. Yeah, so I guess as I talked earlier about build SBOMs, but as I've thought more about lock files, and so lock files I think are a great example, by the way, Michael. So if you've got a source SBOM, I can certainly see that getting checked in, and SBOMs of packages that are getting embedded. If you do, I mean, I'm not sure it's a great idea, but certainly some people do embed that stuff. So if you're embedding that sort of stuff, now I can see it where it's not just SBOMs in general, it's source SBOMs. And then you're pointing off to, hey, the name of the file of the source SBOM is .spdax.json or whatever, whatever the SBOM format in the file of that SBOM is.
what is a source SBOM?
This is what I was mentioning earlier. This is the document that has been written for months ago, but still not released. There are different kinds of SBOMs, and when you get into this stuff, all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, we're talking past each other. A source SBOM is an SBOM generated from just the source code. I don't have access to the build process. I don't know what the build process does. I guess we'll guess. A build SBOM has information about the build process, which does, and therefore a source SBOM doesn't have certain information that a build SBOM would.
Okay, so a source SBOM is a guess, and the build SBOM is the true is the yes.
Yeah,
This is
guess
what-
is probably not right. Is probably not fair. I would say, and a source SBOM is the best information you have when all you have is source code.
It's the thing that you can generate without running
without
a
knowing the
complete
build. Without knowing about the build environment, what can you tell me? Turns out you can tell a lot, actually, just from a source SBOM. Particularly if there's a lock file. Hi, Michael. You actually can know a whole lot about the dependencies. Not everything. I mean, trivial example might be, if you're using, NumPy may not be the best example, but I'm going to go with it for now. NumPy is a widely used package on Python. If you say, hey, I bring in NumPy, it'll say, okay, I bring in NumPy. What does NumPy bring in? Oh, well, now that's a different issue. You start tracking down and you find out, well, it depends on how it's built. You may suddenly define you're depending on many, many lines of Fortran code because it depends on matrix multiplications, and all that code is heavily honed over decades in Fortran. But you wouldn't know that if all you see is the source, because that depends on build and system and so on. I'm overstating it, but my point though is that there's some things you can tell and some things you can't. With a source SBOM, you can get a lot of information, but you necessarily don't have some. And I'm very sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. I also can't read my letters very well.
Michelle, but without M.
Michelle, a pleasure. I'm sorry, my eyes will not read letters right now. I'm still trying to get my pupils to stop dilating.
No, it's perfect. I just wanted to mention that, for example, the dependency resolution in different programming languages present a lot of problems. For example, my tool of choice is Java. So, for example, we have tons of blog sessions about the dependency resolution hell, and how complicated it's to build the graphs. So analyzing the dependencies by what actually at the end of the process of resolving dependencies, it's totally different from the one that you get, for example, in the POM XML or your package JSON if you're using JavaScript. And yes, mentioning, just expanding on what you were mentioning about the build, because I also sit down in the SBOM Everywhere working group. Yes, it's also about like the CI CD agents that we want to know what specific versions and actually trust the agents that are actually building from source and generating the different artifacts. So every single part of this process, it's really interesting. And there is in a specific format that we're not using it so much is the SWID tags that is also telling us about not only the build, but who built it in terms of what actual agent version and information about the environment that it was built. So yes, there are different types of SBOMs, but what is the information that we want to provide here? The exhaustive list of what are we depending on, what are we generating, or how we generated this particular artifacts.
So what information we want to provide in the security insights regarding it is a good question, because I mean it was BOM, but it is very generic, and yeah, it is a standard, but I mean standard is a very elastic term. So honestly, I don't know how to answer to your question. And honestly, initially I would like just to see how people use this section. Maybe Jonathan is just right. We should remove it.
I would say here like I think that the thing that I'm struggling with here is like we're building a specification without defining, like there is no users that we have for this thing, and like there's not even like a Python script to pull this stuff down and like visually present the information in a way that like might be something, or like it's not being pulled by any of the various different dashboards that the Open Source Security Foundation has, right? So like even if we wanted to just take this data and pull it down and like make it into a user interface that like shows this information, that's like that use case of like, hey, are we providing enough information? Are we not providing enough? Like, are we providing too much information? Like and then also having one of these things actually, like, I don't know if anybody else has actually implemented these things for any other projects. Like, how hard is this thing to actually implement as it is, right? Without those three sort of things, using it and actually trying to implement it for a real project that's not itself, you don't know, like you haven't, like rubber hasn't hit the road yet.
Right. We did, Luigi and I did talk about maybe using this as an input to the best practices scorecard. Scorecards and best practices. Scorecards, at least last I checked, is not interested. They only want to do automated analysis, and if it's asserted by the project, they don't want to use the data. Best practices badge, we are absolutely willing to use it, but we also generally require rationales and a mapping to the specific criteria. We probably need to talk about that, but at least up to this point, there isn't such a mapping. So I haven't pursued trying to implement it within the best practices badge.
Initially, it was good for the metric dashboard. That now we have a new project. But for example, there are a lot of good information that are not mapped in the open source project. Bug bounty is one of these. Information about security contact that sometimes it's not easy. We have at the moment a scanner that try to find contact, but that is the best solution that we have. Sometimes also the security policy was not in a standard place. the penetration test report, and generic information about the poster. For example, can bot or not open a pull request? Can you open pull request or not? I mean, sometimes you can find easily it, especially if you're human. You can check on GitHub and you see that the issue are closed, for example, or something similar, or the pull request. Sometimes you see that in GitHub you have just a mirror, and the original repo is self-hosted, and this means that the scorecard cannot really check the security standard, the security posture. You are just checking probably a mirror, and you don't know how it is updated or not. And the security insight is something that is independent by the platform. You just need to follow the specification, and at least we can have something that you can wrap in every moment. So this was, and there are some user case in the README. There is a section that my colleagues are already linked in the chat for which kind of user that can be user that can use the project, user that can want to contribute to the project, the security researcher, the maintainers, so people that want to create scanner. This is the reason why we would like to have a similar file. So technically we have use case. The point is that you cannot launch a specification without to be sure that it has the minimum information that can be helpful. And if we are not able to find to agree in our organization, for sure, this standard cannot be adopted by the community. I mean, it's very hard to convince people to use something. Even if you have an RFC, even if you have all the documentation that you want to have, it needs to be easy to use, to have good information, and probably it needs to be easy to maintain, and it needs to be read by human and machine. Because yes, maybe we are able to create script and automate or create a custom flow, especially big company. But again, the open source is made by people, a single person that maintain a project. Usually you have no team, you are just a single person, and you'll not create a pipeline. You want just to read the file and find the information, so you are a human. And this file should help the community, not just the big teams or corporate. For sure, it can be good also for corporate because it is a YAML. And yeah. So this was why we start to work on the security insights. And probably we see that the community need this file, like the community want to have this bomb, then be able to share or deploy a sort of standard or a specification, a totally different topic. And it's very hard, and I see this now. But that if the question there are use case or we can find use case, yes. I mean, we are writing a security policy in OpenSSF because I tried to deploy the security insight, and I have seen that we cannot pass the check because the security insights require you a small security policy and a contact, just an email, and we don't have it as an organization. So
this topic ties into the other one, which is like the topic of third-party packages and like the dependency lists. So like that was another field that I just proposed that get to yank out, because dependencies, right? You're giving a dependency list, but that dependency list is also variable, and it's something the build generates, and it's not static. Right, it's like you're asking for a field that's like going to fluctuate as you actually are developing the project.
If you redefine it as just the statically declared dependencies, which is what source code files typically do anyway, I don't have any trouble with that, although I'm not sure why we need to restate it. To my knowledge,
there is, I don't get what the value is. Like, for example, you have Gradle build files, right? Gradle, you can have your dependencies in multiple different Gradle.build files. You may have them in build.gradle.kts files. You may have them in a dependencies.toml file. You may have them in like a bunch of, and like also you can do multiple of those things, right? And then also at the end of the day, what gets resolved is really what people care about. And what gets resolved is not even you can't even determine what is resolved in a Gradle build without running the build.
I can explain also why I have added the dependency. It is quite easy. The main reason is that a lot of scanner, especially security scanner, check just the measure languages and the measure dependencies file. If you use a language that is not so popular or not popular enough for companies that provide dependency scanner, probably you launch the scanner, and read the output, you just ignore because there is no information in the output that there are maybe other languages or other dependency. You finding the dependency, you can understand the languages, for example, or for scripting, for a lot of reasons that are in the repo, especially for big repo that have no single language. Now GitHub do a very good overview of the languages that are used in a repo, but it is GitHub, and the idea is to not be too much dependent by the platform, especially because there are a lot of projects that are not in GitHub. And just for example, PDF, Chromium, and a lot of Google projects are not in GitHub. So if we want to have something that can really scan the code base, we need something that and can help. We need something that done directly from the API.
I guess I'm confused though. I mean, yeah, I totally agree with the world does not begin and end with GitHub or any Forge or any of these others. But for the most part, there's already existing tools that do a lot of this kind of analysis. Presumably, we're not replacing them. So
we're allowed. So just to I think I need a more concrete example. You have a C application. C application has a /vendor directory with C Aries and zlib source code embedded in it.
Okay, sure.
Not the awesomest practice, but it
happens. Yes, indeed.
Now, how would you expect to discover that other than commercial tools with hash matching or like weird stuff? And I think one of the answers is Security Insights declare in that says C Aries and zlib as a supplemental to now. I don't expect the requirements.txt file to be copied into Security Insights.
Okay, there's my concern.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe we need to call it like additional dependencies or something.
There
like,
we go. Okay, all right. Now you're starting to sell me on this. Yes, because what I was afraid of is that, Luigi, I was afraid this was re-implementing. Oh, Python has its own system. Ruby has its own system. If we're trying to re-implement everybody else's systems, I'm scared. If the point is, all right, I misunderstood then. All right, so if the point is, use whatever the standard practice is for your ecosystem, and here are the additional dependencies that wouldn't otherwise be captured. And frankly, I think vendor dependencies are a fun one because a lot of build systems will use the vendored one only when they're not available, and so you don't actually know if those particular ones will be used. But you know, but let's ignore that for the moment. If the point is additional dependencies, I would encourage the field name to be named additional dependencies, and then make it really clear that this is for marking dependencies that aren't otherwise marked using the typical ecosystem or something like that, because otherwise I just don't want to reinvent the wheel here.
Well, okay, again, ask the maintainer to it's an SBOM, right? Like, at that point you should the maintainer just be publishing an SBOM, and is this something that should be statically listed inside of a repository file, or is this something that's like a living, like, again, this document is intended to be, okay, you have this document, someone's going to write it and then they're going to leave it alone and they're going to forget about it for years, right?
Probably, yeah.
Do you is there value in a file that has that sort of level of drift with that information in it? Or have we just completely lost the value at that point for listing that information? Or should you, at that point, look at the repository and try to determine it manually if required, or ask the maintainer to publish an SBOM for the project and keep that live?
Some information in the security insight can lose the value over time, for sure. It is designed to be so. The point is, if in the future every project or we find a good way to share, write and deploy as SBOM file, probably you don't need to have a dependency file or something similar. If there is a sort of a big SBOM with all transversal to every package system, something similar. This means that we can in the future remove the dependency just in favor of the SBOM file, but this is why we have a version. So it is designed to change over time, for sure.
The other thing that I raised with this is like there's two fields for dependencies. There's third-party packages, which is a Boolean, and dependency list, which is a list of dependencies. If in my it says, you know, the description is define if the project uses third-party packages. And that the argument that I had to Luigi was that will always be true. You're writing a Python project, you depend upon the Python standard library. You're writing a Java project, you depend upon the Java standard library. Right.
Yeah, the standard library should, I mean, I understand your point, but we can really consider third-party packages the standard library.
I mean, you're also depending upon like an operating system to run the thing on, right? Like that is
the point of this. So I think I remember when this came up like a long time ago, and it was really about like, do you have to worry about other things? And I think I agree that in the vast majority of cases, the answer is yes. But I'm not sure if it's is odd or is even. One of those depends on another package. The other one does not. Now, you could, yes, it depends on the runtime and all of that, and the operating system and atoms in the universe. But I think I agree with Luigi that like drawing the line at like what we all think of as third-party dependencies. Maybe we need to just define it better to scope out standard library and platform and OS and BIOS and junk. But like,
yeah, if you're going to define it as if the project uses third-party dependencies, yes, the answer is always yes. If you're going to scope it to that, maybe like.
I mean, it may also be uninteresting because that information is available in the lock files and the dependent requirements.txt and the additional dependencies. So if like none of those exist, then the uses third-party dependencies is like by definition false.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's by definition true. So it's really a calculated field, which.
Yes, if it's a calculated field, then don't have it in this field statically, I think.
In addition, again, Scanner can find some dependency file for popular languages, but not all dependency file for all the languages. So, okay, you can aggregate a lot of Scanner, but no one do this. Scanner are GitHub, Scanner are Sneak, Scanner are some other tool by OWASP, Java, and Mac, but that is for a lot of popular enough, but not. I mean, popular enough to be used by enough user from my perspective. A good example is Metabase. Metabase is an open source project that give you dashboard to aggregate data, usually business data, and you can self-host it. So if there is a critical security vulnerability in Metabase, all the self-hosted instances are exposed. But at the same time, Scanner are not so good to find the closure dependency file. So if you have at least a link, you know that there is something that is not usual. And if you're a human, or to start to understand why there is this file that is not found by the scanner, or I mean, you are a human. If the scanner fails, you start to investigate the log. So there is, even if security insight can be scanned by scanner, you cannot have something that don't require human action. I mean, the security insight can help you to reduce the human action, and this is the automation, but at the same time can help the human to find information that scanner miss, and this is why we need it.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. I suggest we move on. We continue this conversation.
Definitely, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Luigi.
No, it's all good. Yeah.
Jonathan, if you want, we can work together to rewrite this sentence and find a better definition, a solution that can work.
Sure, grab some time on my calendar. I'll send you my Calendly.
Yes, and send you Calendly to me. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Cool. I want to give a quick update on disclosure check. I'm going to try to get this on PyPy actually this week. Right now, there's a wheel file and a tar file on GitHub repo that you can just pip install file name, and it'll bring down the dependencies and do the thing. The outputs in the doc, so change it up a little bit. It's substantively kind of the same. So it looks for it starts out at a package URL, looks for authors, maintainers, email addresses linked from security MDs and similar files. It traces down to GitHub, does what it can there, looks for tide lift, private vulnerability disclosures. I think next on my list was to add deps.dev because they have a nice API now. And all of this is available in JSON too. So it's pretty if you want pretty, or JSON if you want JSON.
Is it using GitHub's API to pull this information down? Because GitHub also has the API to pull down the security information, resolving it from a repository, and then I think looking at the git.github for the org level automatically if it's not present. Like there's a precedence that goes on that GitHub would resolve.
Yes, I don't know that I respect the precedence of it, but I do look at the .github in the org level for security MD. But I'm not using the API. I am looking for magic file names in the thing. I think does the GitHub API include like what your security policy file like is named, or is it just assume that it's security MD?
I don't know. I just know that there is an API for it.
Yeah. The private vulnerability reporting, I literally like scrape the page and look for the new vulnerability report button because that was the only way I could think of getting it without the an API saying this is enabled or not.
Oh, message that to Kate.
So that's it. If this is useful, that's great. If not, please let me know. If it's missing things, please let me know. Next couple of weeks, we'll get this. I'll formally ask to move this over to OpenSSF. So what I got there. Anything else anyone would like to talk about? Cool.
We'll love to cover down a little bit on the risk dashboard, but we don't have enough time. It's all right.
Okay, we'll put that up at the top next time. Yeah, I understand S2C2F is on the agenda at RSA.
Yep. Yeah, Adrian did that this morning. He said that he had about a half full room, but the room was kind of large, so that's a win for him. He said that it went pretty well. A lot of questions at the end of it too, which was good. S2C2F was talked about a lot during KubeCon apparently. So we got some cleaning up of our repos and our stuff to do because they mentioned a few things that we kind of dropped the ball on a little bit in our efforts to move quick, right? So we get to slow down a little bit and clean some stuff up. Outside of that though, the word's getting out, people are talking about it, and here shortly we should get a lot more people coming into the meetings and contributing and getting that maintainers list to grow a little bit, which is awesome. What we want to do. So yeah, things are moving right along with that as well.
Very cool. Is anybody planning to be at OpenSSF Day in Vancouver in 2 weeks?
I'll be there.
I'll be there. Cool. Looking forward to seeing you all. And actually, what that means is I will not be here at this meeting since it's literally when the conference started. Would you like me to cancel the meeting or keep it and someone else can run it? I'm going to cancel it, in which case we'll meet back in a month. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Can you ask the question again? Sorry, my brain.
Oh, did you want me to keep this meeting for in 2 weeks, even though it's during OpenSSF Day, or cancel?
Oh, no.
Decision is canceled.
Yeah. I was like, yes, in 2 weeks, because we're clearly having a conversation. Oh, during OpenSSF, no.
Yeah. All right.
We will see everybody in person, or many of us.
Hey, there's also the Open Source Security Foundation Vulnerability Disclosure Autofix Working Group meeting this afternoon at 4 p.m. Love to see you all there if you want to come talk about automating fixing vulnerabilities at scale. And one of the use cases for this file that we've all been discussing in this call for the past hour is I actually want to encourage people to put this file in their repositories if they want to opt out of automated vulnerability fixing. And so I want to have this file done so that I can tell people, please use it if you want to opt out of our automated fix campaigns. But I don't want to have people doing it if it's not in a state that we actually like want people to be writing it into.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.